Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development. Every month, members get 1 credit to pick any title, plus 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection, and access to daily news digests from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, as well as guided meditation programs. Between a full-time job in IT and a full-time job in podcasting, it gets harder and harder to sit down and read the books I'm interested in. This is where Audible comes in. I can listen on my daily commute, relaxing, or while out running errands and still get in the books I've been wanting to get into. You can download titles and listen offline anytime, anywhere. The app is free and can be installed on all smartphones and tablets. Now you can try Audible risk-free with a special 30-day free trial by visiting audibletrial.com/nerdery and murdery. That's audibletrial.com/nerdery and murdery. Don't let your busy life get in the way of that great book you've been wanting to read. Go get your free trial of Audible today. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. This is Geoffrey, and we've talked about many times before that I experience problems and struggles with my mental health, and really without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy does work. It's helped for me, but what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, or you're not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's really time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles, and it's time to start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is a customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. So join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And there's a special offer to Nerdery and Murdery listeners. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/nerdery and murdery. That's betterhelp.com/nerdery and murdery. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast.
You're listening to the sweet, sensual, and serendipitous sounds of Nerdery and Murdery.
Zig, damn it. Welcome to episode 64 of Nerdery and Murdery.
64. I'm Zig with your Nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery. Welcome to another week. I'm sure we've got a great episode for you today, and I won't delay anymore. I will turn everything over to the Nerdery side of the house, so take it away, Zig.
Awesome. Today we're going to talk about a giant of theater and film. That is Mr. Neil Simon.
Great.
Marvin Neil Simon was an American playwright, screenwriter, author. He wrote more than 30 plays and nearly the same number of movie screenplays, mostly film adaptations of his plays. He's received more combined Oscar and Tony Award nomination than any other writer. Simon grew up in New York City during the Great Depression. His parents' financial difficulties affected their marriage, giving him a mostly unhappy and unstable childhood. He often took refuge in movie theaters where he enjoyed watching early comedians like Charlie Chaplin. And after graduating from high school and serving a few years in the Army Air Force Reserve, he began writing comedy scripts for radio programs and popular early television shows. Among the latter were Sid Caesar's Your Show of Shows. Neil Simon.
One of my favorites. I loved Your Show of Shows.
Yeah. Neil Simon was one of the quote unquote kids in the hall.
Right.
So how that worked, which is where the Canadian comedy troupe got their name from. There were a couple of writers in the writer's room, and there were a bunch of people outside the writer's room because there wasn't enough room for all of them. And they would hand scripts in as Sid Caesar walked into the writer's room, and he referred to them, "Hey, this is one of the ones from the kids in the hall." He worked alongside other young writers, including Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks, Woody Allen, Larry Gelbart, and Selma Diamond. Larry Gelbart of MASH, Woody Allen of everything, Mel Brooks of everything, and Carl Reiner of everything. His first produced play was Come Blow Your Horn in 1961. It took him 3 years to complete and ran for 678 performances on Broadway, proper Broadway. It was followed by two more successes, Barefoot in the Park and The Odd Couple.
You know, the funny thing about those two as well is I've never seen the plays for Barefoot in the Park and The Odd Couple. I've only seen, there was, you know, of course, the film for The Odd Couple. Mm-hmm. And Barefoot in the Park, it was either on Showtime or HBO, but they did a version of it there, and it was with and I just lost his name, Richard Thomas, and I can't remember the actress that was with it, but it was really, really good. Was it like a staged show, or was it? Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a stage show. Yeah, in front of an audience. It was. Oh
my God!
And it was so good, so good. I need to look that up. Who the actress was in it, because it was so good.
Yeah, I need to catch that, because I've seen several productions of Barefoot in the Park and The Odd Couple. I think that the stage productions are better, and I'm glad you were able to see one, you know, a stage production as opposed to just film's not bad. It's got Robert Redford in it. It's not bad. And Jane Fonda.
Bess Armstrong played the wife.
Oh yeah. I need to check that one out.
Yeah, it also had Barbara Barry in it as Mrs. Banks, so it was really, really good.
Wow. Yeah, well, you know, and The Odd Couple is actually him and his brother. The impetus for that was his brother was very clean, he was very not.
Right.
And his brother shows up quite a bit in his shows, usually as a different name. But yeah, his brother was also a writer for Your Show of Shows. I'll talk about that a little later on in the notes. The BB series, he did Brighton Beach Memoirs, Biloxi Blues, and Broadway Bound, which the brother character features pretty heavily. He did win a Tony Award for The Odd Couple. I'm surprised he didn't win one for Barefoot in the Park.
Yeah.
He was celebrated as the hottest new playwright on Broadway from the 60s to the 80s. He wrote stage and screen. Some of his screenplays were based on his own works at stage. His style ranged from farce to romantic comedy to more serious dramatic comedy. Overall, he garnered 17 Tony nominations and won 3 awards. In 1966, he had 4 successful productions running on Broadway at the same time. And in 1983, he became the only living playwright to have a New York theater, the Neil Simon Theater, named in his honor. It's still called the Neil Simon Theater.
Yeah.
He was born on July 4th. Oh, he was born July 4th. That's crazy. 1927 in the Bronx. I did not know that. To Jewish parents. His father, Irving Simon, was a garment salesman, and his mother, Mamie Simon, was mostly a homemaker. Neil had one brother, 8 years his senior, television writer and comedy teacher, Danny Simon. Danny is the brother who shows up in his shows a lot. He grew up in Washington Heights, Manhattan, and graduated from DeWitt Clinton High School when he was 16. He was nicknamed Doc, and the school yearbook described him as extremely shy. It's kind of hard to imagine the crazy stuff that Neil Simon wrote, him being kind of shy, especially the people he was running around with, like Danny and Carl Reiner and But yeah, he was, as a matter of fact, there's an adaptation of Sid Caesar's Your Show of Shows called My Favorite Year. George Steinberg was the main character because he wrote it. But there is a character in there who always whispers into somebody's ear. That was the Neil Simon character.
Gotcha.
Because, yeah, George's memory is Neil never spoke out loud. He would whisper something into either Sid Caesar's ear or Carl Reiner or Mel Brooks's ear, and they would say what he wanted to say. So, I mean, I guess there's some truth to it, but I can't imagine it. All the interviews I've ever seen with, he's a very congenial and jovial man. But Simon's childhood was marked by his parents' tempestuous marriage and the financial hardships caused by the Depression. They do talk about that in Broadway Bound, where his parents had actually split up. You don't see it in Brighton Beach Memoirs or Biloxi Blues. They were still together at that point. Sometimes at night he would block out their arguments by putting a pillow over his ears. His father often abandoned the family for months at a time, causing them further financial and emotional suffering. And as the result, the family took in boarders, and Simon and his brother Danny were sometimes forced to live with different relatives. During an interview with writer Lawrence Grobel, Simon said, "To this day, I never really knew what the reason for all the fights and the battles were about between the two of them. She'd hate him and be very angry, and he would come back and she would take him back. She really, really loved him." Simon said that one of the reasons he became a writer was to fulfill a need to be independent of such emotional family issues. A need he recognized that he was 7 or 8. I'd better start taking care of myself somehow. It made him strong and independent. And he said he thought what made him a comedy writer is the blocking out some of those really ugly, painful things in his childhood and covering it up with a humorous attitude. Do something to laugh at until he was able to forget he was hurting. He was able to do that at the movies as well. He'd look at works of Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, Laurel and Hardy, and he was constantly being dragged out of the movies for laughing too loud.
That's funny.
Yeah. How in the 1930s, how hard do you have to laugh? He acknowledged these childhood films as his inspiration. He wanted to make a whole audience fall onto the floor, writing and laughing so hard that sometimes they passed out. He made comedy writing his long-term goal and also saw it as a way to connect with people. He never knew he knew he was never going to be an athlete or a doctor, so he began writing for pay while he was still in high school. At the age of 15, Simon and his brother created a series of comedy sketches for employees at an annual department store event. To help develop his writing skills, he often spent 3 days a week at the library reading books by famous humorists such as Mark Twain, Robert Benchley, George Kaufman, and S.J. Perelman. Now, soon after graduating from high school, he signed up with the Army Air Force Reserves at New York University. He attained the rank of corporal and eventually sent him to Colorado. During those years in the reserve, Simon wrote professionally, starting as a sports editor. He was assigned to the Lowry Air Force Base during 1945 and attended the University of Denver from 45 to 46. So this is the period of Biloxi Blues, where he was thinking he was going to end up going to war, but he was really too young. By the time he was to be rotated out, the war was over. Simon quit his job as a mailroom clerk in Warner Brothers' office in Manhattan to write radio and television scripts with his brother Danny. Under the tutelage of radio humorist Goodman Ace, who ran a short-lived writing workshop for CBS, their work for the radio series The Robert Q. Lewis Show led to other writing jobs. Max Lieben hired the duo for the writing team of his popular television comedy series, Your Show of Shows. The program received Emmy Award nominations for Best Variety Show in 1951, 1952, 1953, and 1954, and won in 51 and 54.
You know,
Simon,
and I don't know where you can find him. I mean, I know you can find him on YouTube, I'm sure, but
yeah.
But definitely take a minute and watch your show of shows. It is extremely funny.
Imogene Coca is probably the funniest woman in the world at that point.
I wouldn't disagree.
Easily.
Yes,
Yeah,
she was great, and just all the
She's
stuff.
She's such a good writer too.
Yeah.
Simon later wrote for the Phil Silver Show, which was kind of it was kind of the successor to your show of shows. Simon later recalled the importance of these two writing jobs in his career. Between the two of them, I spent 5 years and learned more about what I was eventually going to do than in any other previous experience. But I mean, look at who he was working with. Some of the funniest people, I don't necessarily want to say ever, but definitely in the 50s and the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Simon described a typical writing session. There were about 7 writers, plus Sid Caesar himself, Carl Reiner, and Howie Morris. Mel Brooks and maybe Woody Allen would write one of the other sketches. Everyone would pitch in and rewrite, so they all had a part in it. It was probably the most enjoyable time he ever had writing with other people. Simon incorporated some of these experiences into his play, Laughter on the 23rd Floor. 2001 TV adaptation of the play won him 2 Emmy Award nominations. If you have not seen Laughter on the 23rd Floor, it's about how they took your shows off the air. It's like their last gasp. Nathan Lane plays Sid Caesar. Oh my God, he is so funny.
Love Nathan Lane.
But yeah, Neil Simon started out as one of the kids in the hall, and he eventually moved into the writer's room. He also penned material for the following shows after Phil Silver's and your show shows: The Gary Moore Show, Sid Caesar's Comedy Hour, Stanley, and The Phil Silver Show. His first Broadway experience was Catch a Star. He collaborated on sketches with his brother Danny. In 1961, Simon's first Broadway play, Come Blow Your Horn, again ran for 678 performances at the Brooks Atkins Theater, which is now the Neil Simon Theater. Barefoot in the Park, The Odd Couple. In 1966, the 4 shows he had running were Sweet Charity, The Star Spangled Girl, The Odd Couple, Barefoot in the Park. I would like to talk about The Star Spangled Girl because I saw a high school production of this that is one of the best Neil Simon bits I have ever seen. And it was a high school production. My friend and current actor, Ethan Norris, was in it. It was the first time I ever saw him in anything, and I realized, wow, I should really concentrate on writing and directing because I'm not this good. And he was 17, and he understood that part in ways that I wouldn't have conceived of. So big shout out to Ethan Norris. And he's a current actor working locally. So if you get a chance to go see him, he's really great. It has been since he was a kid. He earned royalties of $1 million in 1966 for those 4 plays. Neil Simon, circling back.
Wow.
Yeah. $1 million in 1966. That's a lot of change. His professional association with producer Emmanuel Eisenberg began with the Sunshine Boys, and continued with The Good Doctor, God's Favorite, Chapter 2, They're Playing Our Song, I Ought to Be in Pictures, Brighton Beach Memoirs, Biloxi Blues, Broadway Bound, Jake's Women, The Goodbye Girl, and Laughter on the 23rd Floor. Now, The Star Spangled Girl. I want to talk about this one because I think this is one of the ones that not a lot of people have seen. So what it is it's a love triangle mixed with politics. Roommates and radicals Andy Hobart and Norman Cornell are 2 young dudes in San Francisco apartment that doubles as the publishing office for their magazine Fallout, which is dedicated to fighting the system in America. They are scraping by working on this magazine. and a former Olympic swimmer, Sophie Rauschmeyer, an all-American Southern girl, moves into the apartment next door, who's friendly and charming. And it hooks poor Norman because he believes it's love at first sight. Or as they play it, love at first smell. But she doesn't reciprocate Norman's feelings because Norman is obsessed with Sophie. Andy has to hire her just to keep the magazine going because Norman won't write. So meanwhile, Andy is fielding telephone calls from their irate printer who wants to collect the money he's owed. The landlady is owed back rent, so Andy gives her motorcycle rides and surfing lessons to pay for their rent. Sophie tries to convince the boys they're editing a dangerously subversive magazine, but Sophie figures out she's annoyed because she wants Andy and not Norman. Even though they are politically diametric, this threatens to destroy the magazine and the men's friendship. And it just kind of goes on from there, but it's a real small show. It takes place in the apartment, which is a tiny little set. You never see the girls' apartment. I don't know if they ever made a film of this. If they have, I have not seen it. But if you get a chance, Star Spangled Girl is one of those Neil Simon bits that's just brilliant. It is so snappy. And again, I'd recommend seeing this live.
Mm-hmm.
If you get a chance. If there is a film, I'll find it. I know I've got some links. But yeah, I didn't find one for Star Spangled Girl. Simon also adapted material originated by others, such as the musical Little Me, based on the novel by Patrick Dennis's Sweet Charity, from the screenplay of the film Knights of Cabrina. He did that with Federico Fellini. Promises, Promises, which is a musical version of Billy Wilder's film The Apartment. And Last of the Red Hot Lovers in 1969. By that time, Simon was reputedly earning $45,000 a week from his shows. Yeah, excluding the sale of rights, making him the most financially successful Broadway writer ever. Simon also served as an uncredited script doctor, helping to hone the books of Broadway-bound plays or musicals under development. He did this for A Chorus Line, which ran for 10 years. During the 70s, he wrote a string of successful plays, sometimes more than one while he was playing at the same time, to standing room only audiences. Although he was by then recognized as one of the country's leading playwrights, his inner drive kept him writing. He said, "Did I relax, watch my boyhood ambitions being fulfilled before my eyes? Not if you were born in the Bronx in the Depression and Jewish, you don't." Which was kind of funny. Simon drew extensively on his life and experiences for his stories, and the settings are typically working-class New York neighborhoods, similar to the ones in which he grew up in. In 1983, he would begin writing the first of the 3 autobiographical plays, which we refer to as the BBs. Brighton Beach Memoirs, followed by Biloxi Blues and Broadway Bound. Now, I did a production of Brighton Beach Memoirs in college, where I played the character of Eugene, Neil Simon. And I can say this, after having read the book and studied it and ran through the lines, sometimes Neil Simon writes things not to drive home a point, but just because they're funny. Just because they're funny. And that is okay, because if you pepper in that humor into the plot, it makes the characters that much more lovable. And it's not to the point where it's a, joke, 30 seconds later, another joke. It's organic the way he writes it.
Right.
He writes from the point of view as, this is the funny thing this character would say. So he wrote quite a bit of acclaim for this trilogy. He received a Pulitzer Prize for the follow-up play to this, which was called Lost in Yonkers, which starred Mercedes Rule and was a success on Broadway. Following Lost in Yonkers, Simon's next several plays did not meet with commercial success. The Dinner Party, which starred Henry Winkler and John Ritter, was a modest hit.
And that's hard to believe, to have those two in it and it be a modest hit.
Well, Broadway was suffering in 2000. Simon's final play, Rose's Dilemma, premiered in 2003 and received poor reviews. Simon chose not to write the screenplay for the first film adaptation of his work, Come Blow Your Horn, preferring to focus on his playwriting. However, after he saw the movie, he said he's never going to let that happen again. So he won Academy Award nominations for turning his screenplay or his play into screenplays for The Odd Couple, The Sunshine Boys, The Goodbye Girl, California Suite, and other movies which he kind of punched up, The Out-of-Towners and Murder by Death. Although most of the films were successful, movies were always of secondary importance to Neil Simon. He was much more into doing things for a live audience, which is why he was so successful in early television, because that was shot live. You know, he wasn't great writing for episodic television later on because it didn't interest him. He wanted something he could bounce off a live audience, like Your Show of Shows, which had a live audience, which went out live. The only reason we have it is because they were basically recording the live shows on film on a process they call kinetoscope, which is why they look kind of, I don't want to say blown out, but there's almost like a lighting issue with them. And it wasn't from the original film recording. It was the fact that they kinetoscoped them out. Basically what they did was, while they were filming, they were running that film through what eventually became a TV camera.
Mm-hmm.
So it made, like, you know, when the light flashed on something like white or really bright, it would kind of flash the screen a little bit. So you're going to get that when you go see some of that Your Show of Shows. Just be prepared. It's usually over in half a second, but it can be a little off-putting. But many of the earlier adaptations of his work were very similar to the original plays. Simon observed in hindsight that he didn't have an interest in films then. He was mainly interested in writing for theater, and the plays never really became cinematic. Like The Odd Couple, even though it was highly successful, he was unhappy with the film. He thought the film could have been better. That if he'd have been more concentrated for shooting for a film audience as opposed to a live audience, that it could have been better. I disagree. I think the film of The Odd Couple is better than the series. I loved The Odd Couple series, the original.
Right.
I thought the acting in it was really good, but I think that film was really, really well done. It was a little dark, lighting wise. But that's not on Neil Simon. That's more on the director not lighting the street scenes really well.
Well, and you say the original TV show, that just to throw it out there, there was a re-release of it with Matthew Perry and somebody else.
Oh God, I love it. Thomas Lennon.
Yeah, that was just not as good. It really wasn't.
No, it wasn't, and it had. Oh my God, I can't think of the actress's name. Shirley from Community.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh my God.
I don't. I don't watch Community.
That's right. You should. It's really funny. Yeah, I watched some of it. I was okay with Thomas Lennon. I was okay with Matt Perry. I was okay with Yvette Nicole Brown.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they were really good, but the writing just wasn't crisp.
No, not at all.
It was not nearly snappy enough. You could tell that they'd steered away from Neil Simon's original idea. Well, Neil and Danny, because it was about them. The key aspect of most consistent in Simon's writing style is comedy, situation, and verbal. He presents very serious subjects in a way that makes the audience laugh to avoid weeping. He achieves this with rapid fire jokes and wisecracks. Again, he makes sure they're coming from the right voice, but it's a wide variety of urban settings. I will say this. If you have never seen Lost in Yonkers, because there is a film of it, I want to say it's on HBO Max, Richard Dreyfuss and Mercedes Ruehl are incredible, just incredible in the film adaptation. It's shot in and around Yonkers, New York. It's sad, but also funny and poignant. It's just beautiful. I think it and Star Spangled Girl may be his two best bits of work. Yeah. And I've seen a lot of Neil Simon because I like his stuff. I think he's just, again, that snappy dialogue
Right.
makes me happy. Now, theater critic John Lair believes that Simon's primary theme is the silent majority, many of whom are frustrated, edgy, and insecure. Simon's characters are likable and easy for audiences to identify with, but they often have difficult relationships in marriage, friendship, or business, and they're struggling to find a sense of belonging. Now, according to biographer Edith McGovern, there's always an implied seeking for solutions to human problems through relationships with other people. And Simon is able to deal with serious topics of universal and enduring concern while still making people laugh. He also has a great compassion for his fellow human beings. Like in Brighton Beach Memoir, it's a family, two brothers, a mom and a dad, an aunt, and her two daughters. The aunt's husband has left them. Died. So they've moved the aunt and the two daughters into the house with them to take care of them. At the same time, Hitler's running through the Sudetenland and invading Poland. So they're gearing up to take in more refugees from this small little house in Brighton Beach, New York. All of this is going on while Eugene is trying to see a picture of boobs.
Right.
Which he eventually does. Good for Eugene. And I can say in the last evening of the final production of my college experience with that, I actually got a picture of a real woman's boobs that I did not know I was getting. Yeah, well, okay, so, then I look over to stage right, and one of my cast members is showing me her boobs.
All right.
Yep. It was all to make me laugh. And I stopped doing the accent. I couldn't do it anymore. I was laughing too hard. Luckily, I only had one line left. So, yeah, it's a quick word of warning, kids. If you're ever in a production of Brighton Beach Memoirs, just be prepared. If you're playing Eugene, when they hand you that postcard, it may not be the same postcard every evening. But that's about it for Neil Simon, other than get out and watch it. Get out and watch it live. You can go see it live now. There are community theater productions. There are college productions. There are high school productions. It's brilliant. It's worth going to see kids getting this because they can tap into it. They're universal ideas. And, Neil Simon's a genius.
Absolutely agree. His stuff is really good. It's really funny. Highly recommend Barefoot in the Park and The Odd Couple. Especially if you can get that Bess Armstrong and Richard Thomas one. That was just for Barefoot in the Park was brilliant.
I'm going to look that up and find a link if we can. You said you thought it was on either HBO or Showtime?
I guarantee it was HBO or Showtime.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to see if I can't find a link for that as well, because that would be kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very funny. Very funny stuff.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you for that trip with Neil Simon. So with that, we'll step over to the murdery side of the house.
Murder.
For today, I got my information from Talk Murder with Me, Chilling Crimes, and the Denver Post. And this is the story of Kenia Monge.
Kenia Monge?
Kenia Monge.
Kenia Monge.
So it starts off as a story we know all too well. There's a young woman who's standing in the entryway of a nightclub in the early hours of the morning. She's intoxicated. She's wandered off. She's away from her friends, and she's now finding herself alone outside. Her phone, purse, and keys are still sitting on the table inside the club. And being in Denver in April, there's a chill in the air, and all she has on is a light jacket over a short dress and a pair of heels. All she wants to do is go home and sleep. A man drives up and asks her if she needs some help, and she's quick to accept. He's in his early 30s. He's clean cut, and he has a wide, charming smile. His teeth are perfectly straight and white. It's clear that he takes pride in his appearance. And he also looks as he's generally concerned for her welfare. He's just a friendly stranger, a good Samaritan looking to do a good deed, as she thinks that to herself. Plus, as the warm buzz from the alcohol is beginning to fade, she's starting to feel the cold, so she gratefully climbs inside the vehicle. No one would ever see her alive again.
Oh, no.
So Kenia Monge was born January 26 in 1992 in the Honduras. Her mother, Maria, was just 15 when she gave birth to her. And in April of 1993, when Kenia was just over a year old, Maria left Honduras for the United States, leaving Kenia with her mother, who was her grandfather. It was no doubt the hardest thing that Maria had ever done, but at 16, she was still a child herself. Moving to an all-new country and navigating life was going to be difficult enough without a baby, so she was doing what she thought was best for Kenia. Maria loved her daughter more than anything, and all she wanted was for Kenia to come to live with her in America permanently. And in 1994, Maria met a man named Anthony Tony Lee. They fell in love, married, had 2 children of their own, Kimberly and Anthony. In 2004, when Kenia was 12, she moved to the United States, and it was Maria's dream come true. Her family was finally whole. Kenia spoke very little English when she first arrived, but she was a fast learner and never let it hold her back. To Maria's delight, Tony loved Kenia just like she was his own daughter, and it was a matter of weeks after Kenia moved into her new home, she began to call him Tony Dad. Kenia immediately bonded with her half-siblings, particularly Kim, and the two became instant best friends, and everything felt just perfect. The Monge Lee family lived in Aurora, Colorado, directly east of Denver, and as of 2019, Aurora had a population of about 380,000 people.
Wow, Aurora's a lot bigger than I thought it was.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big suburb.
Having spent her childhood in Honduras, a country where poverty is widespread and opportunities are few and far between, when Kenia came to the United States, she never took anything for granted. She was determined to embrace all her new country had to offer. She excelled in her classes at Cherry Creek High School, and on graduating, she began attending a local college in Denver where she studied broadcasting. By this point, she had moved out of her family home and was living in an apartment with her boyfriend, Louis Easton. Not only was Kenia highly intelligent, she was extremely kind and caring. She made friends easily thanks to her warm and loving personality, and she had an active social life, but she also enjoyed relaxing at home with her family. At 19, Kenia and her friends were not of legal drinking age, so they used fake IDs to gain entry into bars and clubs in downtown Denver. Kenia's father, Tony Lee, said that he and her mother, Maria, did not know that Kenia and her friends had used fake IDs and were using them to get into clubs. They always viewed their daughter as responsible, especially because she'd never been in trouble with the law, but parents don't always know everything about their children. Kenia was, after all, still a teenager, and it's sort of expected that teens will rebel a little, or in some cases a lot. Kenia and her friends made plans to go out on the evening of March 31st, 2011. They eventually ended up at the 24K Lounge in downtown Denver. And as the night progressed, they became very drunk. Kenia was just 4'11" and weighed between 90 and 115 pounds, so it didn't take her much to feel the effects of the alcohol.
No, yeah, my oldest kid, Kelsey's about that size as well. She's actually quit drinking at this point because 1 and she's done, 2 and she's sick.
Sure. There are differing reports how Kenia ended up outside the club, including that she told her friend she was going to the bathroom and just never returned to the table. There was also a report that she was kicked out for being too drunk. Either way, she did end up outside on her own without her purse, her keys, or her phone, which were sitting on the table with her friends inside the club. I'd assume that her friends were looked for her, but they had no luck, and they just thought she made her own way home or bumped into someone she knew and went off without them. But something I couldn't figure out is how there were not serious alarm bells going off when they realized she had left without her personal belongings, basically things she would normally have on her at all times.
Purse, keys, phone.
Well, and this was not a group of girls she was normally with, so maybe they didn't have, maybe they didn't have the same code of, we go in together, we leave together.
Yeah.
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. Or if you're leaving with somebody else, tell somebody.
Well, Kenia's family would find out the following day she had not spent the night with her usual group of friends, but two girls she was not as close with, and the family had never met these girls before. So, again, they probably didn't have the same nightclub behavior.
Yeah.
And know, or even know if it was like Kenia to just wander off and leave by herself.
That's true. Yeah. If they didn't know, it's, oh man, she may do this all the time.
Well, on the morning of Friday, April 1st, Kenia's boyfriend, Lewis, became worried when he realized Kenia had not come home from the night before. There were no calls or messages on his phone from her either. And she had been out on plenty of nights, but always made it back to her apartment. If she didn't, he was always sure that she would have let her know where she was going.
Mm-hmm.
So he sounded the alarm. He called Kenia's sister, Kim, asking if she had heard or seen Kenia, but Kim replied she had not and told her that she needed to talk with her parents right away and see if they had heard anything. So Kim called her parents, telling her that Kenia had not come home for the night. Both Tony and Maria rushed home from work right away. They called everybody they could think of who might have an idea where Kenia was. And according to her close group of friends that she usually went out with, Kenia had spent the night with her, quote, other friends and had not seen her at all the night before. That afternoon, the two friends Kenia had been out with came to the Monge home. Tony, Maria, and Kim were all frantic, hurling question after question to the girls about what had happened the night before. And to their dismay, the girls admitted that they had used fake IDs to get into the 24K nightclub. They said the last time they saw Kenia was just after midnight, and they brought along with them Kenia's purse, her phone, her keys with the head wallet inside, which they had explained that she left on the table at the club. At that, Tony, Marie, and Kim felt their hearts sink because Kenia going anywhere without her phone was completely unheard of. There was no doubt in their mind that something had gone seriously wrong. And then suddenly a text message from a number that was not saved in her phone came through. And it said, quote, "Hey, this is Travis, the guy who gave you a ride last night. Creepy white van, smiley face. Did you get home okay?" Tony discovered the message and he felt a jolt of adrenaline because this was huge. Travis, whoever he was, might know Kenia's whereabouts. So he started calling the number repeatedly, but nobody answered. Frustrated and overcome with worry, Tony and Maria made the decision to file a missing persons report. But when Tony explained the situation, the officer on the line was dismissive and unsympathetic, telling him that she would probably turn up soon. And besides, they could not file a report until she had been missing for 72 hours. Side note on that is not true. You can file a missing persons report on somebody who is missing immediately. You don't have to wait 24, 48, or 72 hours. You can report them missing immediately.
We've discovered this recently because we had this conversation. It's like, wait a minute.
Yes. Well, the following day on April 2nd, Travis, who Tony had been trying to get in touch with, finally called back. And he relayed to Tony an elaborate story of how he'd seen Kenia on the street outside of 24K talking to a homeless man about 2:30 a.m. He asked her if she needed help, and she said yes. She needed to get her car, which was parked at another club. Kenia was very drunk, Travis told Tony, so he offered to get Kenia a ride in the car. The weird thing is, given that her keys were inside at 24K and how drunk she was, I'm really not sure what she would have done when she got to her car anyway.
Yeah, she didn't have her keys.
Well, they drove to the club but couldn't find her car, so Travis offered to give her a ride home. She told him where she lived and said it was super close to, and he said it was super close to the bakery where he rented a workspace, so he knew it well, so he began driving in that direction. But then Kenia said she wanted to buy cigarettes, so they stopped at a Conoco gas station. However, the station was closed. Then Kenia saw an Asian man standing nearby smoking, who Travis referred to as Dan. And Kenia approached Dan. He gave her a cigarette. They smoked and were speaking to each other in Spanish. Then they walked off together, and that was the last he saw of her. Tony was pretty suspicious of Travis's story, but he thanked him for the information. Once again, Tony called the police, telling him that he spoke with Travis, who had told him that Kenia had wandered off with some guy met at a gas station in the middle of the night. He pleaded with them to file a missing persons report, but they still refused because it had not been the 72 hours that they said it needed to be. Understandably, Tony was upset at the lack of concern, so he called Travis again and began grilling him. Travis suggested that he and Tony meet at the Conoco gas station where he had last seen Kenia, and so Tony agreed, saying he would be there right away. As he hung up the phone, Tony went and grabbed his 9mm handgun. Maria asked what he was doing, and Tony explained he was going to go meet Travis at the gas station. Police weren't helping, and he had to take matters into his own hands. Maria's mind began racing. She didn't like this at all. Her husband was going to meet this mystery man whom they knew nothing about. He could be dangerous, and he was bringing his gun. What if emotions overcame him and he did something irrational? Mm-hmm. She begged him not to go, but he said he had no choice, and then he left. Maria was so worried, she called the police, telling them where Tony was going and that he was carrying his gun, which, by the way, is illegal, which is legal in Colorado because it's an open carry state.
Yes.
The police did agree to send an officer to the Conoco station where Tony and Travis planned to meet in case things got out of hand. When Tony arrived, there was already a police officer there, as well as Travis and a friend he had brought along. He parked his white van and came over to Tony. He gave the same account he'd given on the phone to Tony earlier that day, that he and Kenia had sat in his van at the gas station parking lot after she asked him to stop and buy cigarettes. She was very upset, so he tried to teach her breathing exercises to calm her down. When he saw a man walking by smoking, who was Dan, she got out of Travis's van and asked him for a cigarette, and the two walked away together.
How did you know the guy's name was Dan?
He didn't explain that. It's just said he knew him as Dan.
Okay. All right.
Tony did study Travis as he spoke, and he said that he felt genuine and trustworthy. From his appearance, Tony did not get the feeling he was some sort of hardened criminal, but then what's a hardened criminal supposed to look like, right?
Yeah. Ted Bundy looked like the all-American boy.
Right. But he did say that the story just sounded off. Tony could not imagine Kenia just wandering off with some man she met at the gas station in the middle of the night. And the police officer also said the story sounded strange. He asked that Tony give him and Travis some privacy while he asked a few more questions. While the officer spoke with Travis, Tony walked in the direction of Travis's van. As he got closer, he was hit with an overwhelming smell of bleach, which really threw him. He took the officer aside and told him about the odor emanating from the van. The officer approached the van and experienced the same thing, the intense chemical smell he couldn't ignore. So before we continue on the story, let's take a look. Let's take a little look into Travis's criminal history, which is pretty extensive.
Oh.
This is the information that came from the article in the Denver Post. In 2011, Travis was 31 years old. When he was 17 years old, he was charged with breaking into 16 different homes and businesses in Fort Collins, Colorado, stealing over $15,000 worth of cash and goods. When police searched his room, they discovered pairs of women's underwear, which had been vandalized. They were ripped, and the letter M had been written on them in black marker pen. Travis was convicted on 2 counts of felony burglary and sentenced to 9 years in prison, but instead of going to prison, he was ordered to enroll in military camp. He would only spend 2 months at the camp before being kicked out, and then he was placed on probation. In 1998, he was arrested for criminal harassment while still on probation, and in 1999, he was carrying a knife, violating his probation once again. He broke his curfew a total of 43 times. This would result in him being sent to community corrections. He was charged with assault in 2014 for throwing rocks at women jogging in Highland Ranch, Colorado. He pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of harassment involving physical force and went to jail for 1 month. At the time of Kenia's disappearance, he was on probation for a domestic violence charge. Denver homicide detective Luis Estrada spoke of how Travis's criminal history was one of which started with relatively minor offenses and progressed into more violent ones. Quote, it started with burglaries, theft, and moved on to harassment and assault. It started to get a little more severe every time. Estrada believed that violence gave Travis thrills. Two of his ex-girlfriends described him as going through a sort of transformation while engaging in sexual role activity. One of them said he had this real screeching look on his face. He really enjoyed the pain he inflicted on him. So Travis didn't have a very great track record.
No.
So let's go back to the Kenia case.
Okay.
The police officer at the gas station asked Travis if he could take a look inside of his van, and Travis agreed to let him do so. On opening the back door of the vehicle, it revealed an absolutely spotless interior, complete with brand new carpeting. But the front of the van, around the driver and passenger seat, was a complete mess with food wrappers and other garbage strewn everywhere. The officer found this suspicious, but it wasn't enough to hold him. Travis agreed to write out his statement from the night Kenia disappeared, and as they were about to leave, Travis approached Tony once more. Travis began blubbering like a baby and apologizing to Tony, saying he wished he had followed through on what he had started. Tony thanked him for his help and put his hand out for him to shake, and when Travis took it, however, his hand was shaking violently. According to Tony, it was there and then that he knew Travis was the last person to see Kenia alive. After 72 hours had passed, the investigation into her disappearance began on Monday, April 4th. Kenia's family and friends spent the preceding days handing out missing person flyers and searching everywhere they could. Kenia's disappearance affected so many, the entire community was in a state of shock. Leading the investigation was Denver Police Detective Nash Garul of the Missing and Exploited Persons Unit. Detective Estrada was there to assist, were it to become a homicide investigation. On April 5th, surveillance footage of Travis Forbes was given to detectives by the owner of Debbie's Bakery and Cafe, Monica Poole. The footage was from April 1st. The bakery, located on South Trenton Way in Aurora, was where Travis rented a space to bake his gluten-free granola bars for his business. The bars were called Forbies, and he sold them to other businesses in the area. On April 6th, Travis was brought into Denver police for a formal interview. He repeated the story he told Tony and the police officer when they met at the gas station on April 2nd. After he left the Conoco station, he said he went to his girlfriend Carrie Humphrey's home, arriving between 3 and 3:30 a.m. He said he left for work at 8:30 a.m. on April 1st. When detective examined Travis's phone records, however, they revealed that he was nowhere near Carrie Humphrey's home, so this would be the first time they had caught him in a lie. Detectives were not feeling good at this point about the prospects of finding Kenia alive. On April 8th, Denver police spokesman Lieutenant Matthew Murray commented on the severity of the situation. Quote, we get a lot of missing person cases. No one thinks this girl ran away. We have reason to believe that what took place is not good, and we are very concerned. Monica Poole, the owner of Debbie's Bakery, had a wealth of information regarding Travis Forbes that she was eager to tell detectives. She told them that she was dismayed when she went to the bakery on the morning of April 2nd and realized her surveillance cameras had been turned off.
What?
She checked the recordings, and the one right before the cameras were turned off showed Travis alone in the bakery about 7:30 p.m. on April 1st, and she could see he was wearing long latex cleaning gloves. Despite what Travis had said to detectives about leaving his girlfriend's home for work on April 1st, he was not actually scheduled to come into the bakery that day. Detectives viewed the footage from the cameras before they were turned off, and it showed Travis rolling a cart with a large white cooler on top into the walk-in freezer in the bakery. The cooler had been duct taped shut. He was then caught on film carrying a roll of carpet into the bakery. Next, he walked back out to his van holding appeared what to be a bottle of bleach, and then he turned off the surveillance cameras. Detectives interviewed other business owners in the building surrounding Debbie's, and one man told them he had seen a 55-gallon barrel being burned by two men behind Debbie's Bakery later in the evening of April 1st, and there was a white van parked nearby.
Two men?
Two men. That's what the witness said.
Huh.
On the afternoon of April 2nd, another business owner told detectives he had seen Travis cleaning a large white cooler in the back of the van, which was parked behind the bakery. When Monica asked Travis what he had been burning, he told her it was marijuana that had gotten moldy. He explained that he turned the cameras off because he was going to change his clothes, but she said that he lies all the time. She also noticed that he had a gash on his arm, which he said was the result of being attacked by a homeless man as he slept in his van. By this point, Kenia's case was all over every news channel in Colorado, as well as making headlines out of state. Travis Forbes, who clearly thought himself to be a pretty good actor, seemed to be enjoying giving interviews to the media. He was very emotional in the interviews, going over all the things he could have done in relation to his made-up story about Kenia going off with the strange man she met at the gas station. Then in the interviews, he seems to forget Kenia's name. He kept referring to her as, quote, the missing girl, which her story was everywhere, and he's the main suspect in the case, which he acknowledged he was. How do you forget the victim's name?
Yeah. Yeah, especially Kenia. That's not a common name.
No.
It seems like that would just stick in your head.
No, exactly.
Unless you're trying to distance yourself from them.
Right. Well, in spite of the suspicions mounting against him, Travis fled the state. This was about a month after Kenia's disappearance in late April, early May. Monica Poole recalled that in addition to behaving suspiciously on surveillance footage, Travis also did some bizarre things in the week following Kenia's disappearance. He approached her and asked her if she wanted to buy $1,000 worth of votes for $100 and ended up selling them for $50. Then he started muttering about how he would have to change his name and leave the country because, quote, that girl ruined my life. Not long after this, Travis got in his friend's car and drove to Austin, Texas.
Oh, man.
Detectives continued to scrutinize every detail of Travis's story. The fact that he had just disappeared didn't really help his case either. Innocent people generally don't tend to make a run for it when investigation begins heating up. They questioned Travis's girlfriend, Carrie Humphrey, whom Travis said he had been with between 3 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. on April 1st, and she confirmed his story. But remember how I mentioned that detectives obtained his phone records and they showed he was not, in fact, anywhere near Carrie's home at that time?
Yep.
Well, he was actually in Keansburg, which was a tiny rural town about 40 miles northeast of Denver. And while in Keansburg, detectives found that he made several calls. Police would search Keansburg 15 times over the next 5 months that followed. They searched on foot, horseback, and used helicopters. And while they were still technically searching for a living person, they unfortunately knew they also had to search ditches and waterways for human remains. Nothing, however, came of these searches, despite how thoroughly they were conducted. On May 4th, after leaving Colorado in his friend's car, Travis was arrested in Austin on suspicion of car theft. Detective Garul flew to Austin, where he met Travis in a police station. He interviewed him for about 3 hours about everything their investigation had turned up so far, particularly the surveillance footage around the bakery. And Garul said he just explained everything away. He had an excuse for everything, the barrel, the cooler, and everything. When asked about what he was burning in the barrel on the night of April 1, Travis gave Garul the same answer he'd given Monica Poole, that it was moldy marijuana. Travis refused to give certain details about whether he had sex with Kenia in his van and asked for a lawyer. And Garul then presented Travis with a search warrant to collect a sample of his DNA. On June 30th, on the car theft charges, he was extradited back to Jefferson County, Colorado. However, his friend dropped the car theft charge, so he was released. Once back in Colorado, Travis went to live in Fort Collins, which was his hometown, with his father. Fort Collins is the home of Colorado State University, so it's not the sort of place detectives wanted Travis living, considering they suspected him of murdering a female college student.
Mm-hmm.
However, Denver detectives were surveilling Travis Forbes. They followed him when he went out to bars and nightclubs and witnessed him being stopped by Fort Collins police. He was very drunk, yelling and making a nuisance of himself. The Denver detectives approached the Fort Collins police, explaining to them who Travis was and why they were surveilling him. And after being stopped by police that first night, Travis seemed to calm down. Denver detectives couldn't justify continuing to surveil him when he was not making any trouble. So after 3 nights, they ended their surveillance. and this would be one decision that the Denver detectives would regret for the remainder of their careers. On July 4th, a mere 4 days after arriving back in Colorado, Travis went out on the hunt in downtown Fort Collins. Lydia Tillman, who was 30 at the time, was originally from Longmont, Colorado. She had been working in New York as a sommelier for 6 years before moving back to Colorado at the beginning of 2011. That July 4th, Lydia was walking home after watching a fireworks display in downtown Fort Collins. Being in the area, she didn't know too many people. Once the fireworks were finished, she began walking home to her apartment, but she didn't know she was being followed. Travis Ford pushed Lydia into her apartment where he raped and strangled her. He then beat her, punching her repeatedly in the face, smashing her jaw and causing severe head trauma. Lydia fought back, kicking and scratching him, but he was physically stronger and far larger than she was, and she eventually stopped fighting him and lay still. Before he left, he doused her naked body with bleach, and then he set the apartment on fire. Something in Lydia forced her up from where she lay so badly beaten and bloodied she had to get out, so she threw herself out of the window of her second-story apartment, escaping from the flames. By the time she jumped, firefighters, police, and an ambulance were at the scene, having responded to a report of the place. Lydia was transported to a hospital, and she was asked by paramedics if she knew the man that attacked her, and she indicated that she did not. And then, unfortunately, shortly after arriving to the hospital, she suffered a stroke and was in a coma for the next 5 weeks. Since bleach had been spread throughout the apartment before it was set on fire, police didn't have much in terms to work with in finding forensics evidence. However, investigators were able to collect microscopic DNA from under Lydia's fingernails, which was sent to the lab for analysis. On July 7th, Fort Collins detective Jacqueline Shakely, who was leading the investigation into the attack on Lydia, got in touch with Detective Garul, asking about the suspicious man Denver detectives had been surveilling in Fort Collins on July 1st. She explained how after examining details in both cases, she thought the same person who attacked Lydia could be responsible for Kenia Monge's disappearance. Detective Garul was convinced that Lydia's attack was work of Travis Forbes, and the details of the bleach in the apartment caught his attention in particular. So everyone was on edge on the days following the attack on Lydia. Travis was once again being surveilled by officers from both Fort Collins and Denver. He spent his evenings downtown, not going into bars, just stalking the streets and leering at women. In the early hours of July 10th, officers watched as Travis spoke to a woman for a good 30 minutes. When they began walking off together, an officer approached Travis and began asking him questions. Visibly nervous, he told the officer that his name was Travis Kennedy and that he didn't have his ID, a phone number, and he couldn't remember his address. At that point, the woman Travis had been talking to was long gone, but they had to let him go. Travis reappeared about 20 minutes later, having changed his T-shirt and put on a hat, and now he was following another woman who was visibly drunk. And this was just a disaster waiting to happen, and the police knew they had to get him off the streets. Around 3 a.m., they arrested him for lying about his name to the police. They didn't mention that he was suspected on the attack of Lydia Tillman, and they were only holding him on a misdemeanor and that he would easily be able to make bond. At 10:45 p.m. on July 11th, Travis was literally minutes away from posting bond, but forensics investigators had been working tirelessly to analyze the DNA found under Lydia's fingernails. They compared it to the sample.
And they got his DNA in Austin.
They compared it to the sample from Austin, and it was a match. So around midnight on July 12th, Travis was rebooked at the jail in Fort Collins on suspicion of attempted murder, sexual assault, and arson. It was not until August 26th that Garul went to Fort Collins to interview Travis in jail. He wanted a solid case as possible against him for Kenia's disappearance. But as it turned out, Garul did not need to spend all of his time preparing himself for the interview. Travis made it very easy. He said, "I'll tell you everything, but I want a deal." He told Garul exactly what happened on the morning hours of April 11th. In return, he asked to not go to prison labeled as a sex offender and prosecutors not to pursue the death penalty against him. He said, quote, "Because if I go to prison as a sex offender, I'm fucked." Travis's account of what happened is as followed. He and a friend had seen Kenia alone near the 24K nightclub talking to a homeless man and had asked her if she needed help getting home. They tried to get her a cab to her boyfriend's apartment, but couldn't find one, so the three of them got into Travis's van.
The other person.
Well, Travis dropped his friend off at his apartment, and then Kenia passed out in the van. Yep. Travis pulled over and climbed on top of her, trying to rape her, but she woke up and began fighting him, so he strangled her to death. He placed her body in the cooler he had in his van, duct taping it shut. Then he put the cooler in the freezer at Debbie's Bakery until he figured out where he would bury her. He decided on Keensburg, where he dug a shallow grave under a grove of cottonwood trees near Interstate 76. And on returning to the bakery, Travis cleaned the inside of his van with bleach and burned everything Kenia had touched in the 55-gallon barrel. On September 7th, Travis's attorney and Detectives Gruel, Estrada, and Shakely went to Keensburg so Travis could show him where Kenia's grave was. When they arrived, he became visibly emotional, breaking down in tears. The grave was about 4 feet deep. She was in a fetal position, covered in a plastic tarp. On September 26, 2011, Travis pled guilty to first-degree murder of Kenia Monge during his advisement hearing, where he was advised of the charges he was facing. He cried, quote, What I did was horrible and cowardly. It was a mistake. Please remember me as I was, not the monster I have become. And immediately after, he was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. He also pleaded guilty to the attempted murder of Lydia Tillman. He said, quote, "Why did I do this? I've been searching for that also in my heart and soul. I think we commit violent acts because deep down we have a hatred of ourselves. I'm so thankful that Lydia Tillman survived, because if I hadn't been caught, I probably would have done this again, because deep down I'm fucked up. I'm evil." Lydia wrote her statement just days after waking up from her coma. She couldn't read it aloud herself, however, as she struggled to speak as a result of her jaw being crushed in the stroke. It was read aloud by Larimer County District Judge Thomas French, quote, "Travis Forbes, you caused me no harm. My spirit, my soul, and my mind remain untouched. May you find peace in life. It was my intention to find the strength in my heart to forgive Travis Forbes. I did. I felt extreme anger towards him, and then I felt sad for him. He must be in so much extreme pain to so brutally hurt another human being." Judge French sentenced Travis to 48 years in prison to be conserved consecutively with the life sentence he received for Kenia's murder. So life plus 48.
Wow.
That always trips me up. Life plus 48.
Just in case he lives a long time.
Yeah. On October 5th, 2011, Travis's girlfriend, Carrie, was arrested on suspicion of attempting to influence a public official. Detectives brought her in for further questioning about Travis's alibi, which she had originally confirmed, saying he was with her between 3 and 8:30 a.m. on April 1st. They showed her the GPS coordinates from Travis's phone, which proved she was lying, that Travis had been in Keensburg at that time. Carrie told detectives that Travis had asked her to lie about where he was that night, and she'd not ask any questions. She pleaded guilty to 1 count of attempting to influence a public official, 1 count of perjury, plus 2 counts of false reporting to authorities. On September 14th, 2012, she was sentenced to 60 days in jail and 4 years supervised probation, and she was also ordered to carry out 2,000 hours of community service and seek mental health counseling. Despite being put through absolute hell, Lydia has pushed herself relentlessly through her recovery, and she's an incredible force. By 2013, she really began to get her life back, working part-time, doing yoga, some travel, driving, and living on her own. In May 2013, she underwent jaw surgery. She assists the Arvada, Colorado Police Department in teaching women self-defense. In 2014, she graduated from the Bikram Yoga College of India in Los Angeles, California, and has since been moved back to Colorado to teach yoga full-time. Kenia's family established the Kenia Monge Foundation, quote, "to provide women and children in Colorado with resources, education, and funding to engage in safe, healthy, and productive behaviors and activities in the community." In addition, the Kenia Monge Foundation will provide families of victims of violent crimes and families of missing victims with the emotional, physical, and financial support they need in order to survive such a tragic event. On September 16, 2011, a memorial service was held at Glory to Glory Christian Center in Aurora. Hundreds of people attended to honor Kenia, who touched so many lives during her short time on earth. At the service, Kenia's sister Kim gave an especially moving tribute to her big sister, quote, "I'm not saying goodbye, I'm saying see you later. I'll see you when God calls me home with you. I don't quite understand why you had to leave us all so soon, but God always has a purpose. I'm not going to look at this as a loss. I'm going to look at this as a gain. I've gained a guardian angel and one that knows I can one that I know I can trust. Rest in paradise, big sister. See you when it's my time. I love you, and you are always definitely are missed." And that is the story of Kenia Monge.
Wow. Well, I'm glad that they were able to get on this guy pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It looks like they pretty much had his number the day after.
Yeah. I mean, I think they were fairly certain fairly quickly that he had something to do with her disappearance. Once the
and they know they prevented him from picking at least 2 women up that they know of,
yes,
just because they were following him around.
Yes. Yeah, so it's really sad what happened to both those women, to both Lydia and Kenia. But a bad guy got off the street, and I think Travis is right. Had they not caught him, he probably would have done it again and again and again. So
yeah, he knows he's that guy.
Good to have another one off the street.
Yes, it is. And if there's anybody listening in the prison, he went down for sexual assault. So.
Okay. Well, thanks for taking that journey with me.
You're welcome.
That'll take us to the end of another recording week. As always, you can find our information on nerderymurdery.com, where you can find our contact information. If you want to let us know things you want to hear, things you don't want to hear, we definitely listen to all of it. If you can also find our links to this episode, find links to what we talked about, pictures as well, get more information on the subjects that we discussed. You can also find the link to our merchandise, or if you wish to show off your fandom, you can find all of our Nerdery and Murdery merchandise that's out there. You can also find the link to our patrons. So if you wish to donate to our show and help us with the cost that it does take to keep going with this show, we really do appreciate each and every one of you. On our Patreon, you do get episodes early, plus you get exclusive episodes that we only link to on our webpage, but they are available exclusive to our patrons.
Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. And last but not least, please don't forget to leave us a review wherever you can. Leave us a 5-star review. It really helps us, and it helps others find our content that may be looking for content that we are putting out there. So with that,
I have been Zig with your Nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery.
Cue the music.